And so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are exactly right now. Good evening to me. I'm live from Haifa, and thank you very much that you found a moment to spend this hour with me. And let me speak about one of the countries that I personally love, that I've been to so many times, and I wish to travel and visit more and more. And so it's the part one of our series dedicated to the Jewish heritage of Balkan region. Let me share the screen. And so today we're visiting Croatia. We're going to stop in 3 cities. We will begin with Split and then go to Dubrovnik and then finish our virtual tour in Zagreb. The Republic of Croatia, it's the country with very interesting shape. Look at the map of it. It has this long coastal line. A lot of the towns and smaller and bigger towns and villages are located along the shore of Adriatic Sea, and then it goes into the land, and that's where Zagreb is. So we're going to visit Split and then go down south to Dubrovnik and then come to Zagreb. And we know that Croatia, not that long ago, was part of Yugoslavia, that giant state that united Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, and Serbia. Now, Republic of Croatia is populated by about 4 million people. There is tiny Jewish community now. There are no more than 2,500 Jews in all of Croatia. Most of them live in Zagreb, and that's where the most active Jewish community is located. But we still find small Jewish communities in, I believe, 8 different locations around the country, including, for example, Split, that we're going to visit very soon. And Croatia is one of those wonderful destinations beloved by the travelers from all over the world, beloved because of its gorgeous environment, this combination of this crystal turquoise blue water of Adriatic Sea, the red roofs of the old buildings, the architecture that reminds us a lot of Italy, the mountains, the natural reserves, beautiful architecture and beaches, and historical towns, and delicious foods. Whether you prefer fish or meat, you will find a lot to eat. You find a great choice there. The food is very much influenced by Italian, Greek, and Turkish traditions. It's all mixed. There are cruise ships that stop in Dubrovnik, so it's visited by hundreds of thousands of people daily. It's possible to rent a yacht and travel along the small islands that are located close to the shore of in Adriatic Sea, and each island is different and each is beautiful. It's serene atmosphere. People are warm and welcoming. There is this southern relaxed atmosphere where you can feel a little bit like in Israel, a little bit like in Italy, a little bit like a taste of Mediterranean culture. All is mixed here. If you ever come to this part of the world, yes, you will visit Dubrovnik, maybe you'll visit Split. I definitely recommend you not to miss Zagreb. Definitely recommend you to spend some time on the small islands and just enjoy the sun, the beach, the sea, and hospitality, and of course, learn about the Jewish culture of this region. This is Zagreb. This is our final point of our today tour. Very often travelers who wish to spend time on the seashore miss Zagreb, not stop there, not even fly over it, but just go directly to Split or Dubrovnik. But in my opinion, Zagreb is definitely worth a visit. It's nice, interesting, and beautiful city of Eastern, or you can say Central Europe. This is the photograph of Split that we're gonna visit in a minute, but before that, we'll make a quick stop in what's called Pula. It's right here. See, this territory, much of the modern Croatian territory became was colonized by Greece, by ancient Greece. So they were Greek colony towns established here already in the 4th century BC. Then, logically, it was occupied by the Roman Empire. So in different locations of Croatia, we find certain certain monuments that date back to the Roman times. So for example, here in Pula, we come to this town right in the middle of the city, we find this wonderful Colosseum, this beautifully preserved Roman structure. And some of the monuments of that era are visible in other parts of Croatia as well. And we're going to speak about while visiting Split. So we go down south from Pula to Split. So Split as this wonderful town on the shore of Adriatic Sea. It's also the airport, and very often if you plan to visit some of the islands and spend time on the seashore, you will fly into Split. You will land here. Split offers us this wonderful combination of the seashore and also mountains that surround the town and give us wonderful view. Next to Split, see, this is Split over here, but next to Split, there is a small place called Solin or Salina. Historically, Salina, or Salona, was a Roman colony town. And 2,000 years ago, it was a capital of Dalmatia, so of all of this region. Today, if you go visit Solin, what you find there, you find these ruins, the ruins of that old Roman town. During the archaeological excavations, these interesting objects that you see on your screen were found. See, these are clay oil lamps with the depiction of menorah. This is clear archaeological evidence of the presence of Jews on this territory. Most of the historians think that Jews first arrived on the territory of modern Croatia around 1st to 2nd century of our era, exactly after the destruction of the Second Temple, just because it was part of the Roman Empire. And so as other citizens of Roman Empire, they were able to travel to different parts of it. In the 7th century, this particular town was nearly leveled to the ground by the invaders. Among them, there were different tribes, including Slavic tribes. Plus, there was a heavy earthquake, so the inhabitants of Salona, they left it and moved into Split. So that's how Split turned into bigger town. And this is what Split it is today, the town facing the sea, facing Adriatic Sea. This is the central embankment with this boulevard with different restaurants, hotels, and shops. Historically, this very place was occupied by the palace. It's called Diocletian's Palace. It was a palace built by the commission of the Roman Emperor Diocletian at the turn of the 4th century. And it was from the very beginning, it was a giant palace, historically, originally belonged to the emperor, but then step by step, it transformed into the town. So when in the 7th century, inhabitants of Salona, including Jews, needed to find refuge, needed to go somewhere, running away from their hometown, they came to this palace and settled within the walls of the palace. This is exactly the image of the emperor. Interestingly enough, Diocletian even mentioned in Talmudic stories, he grew up in Tiberias, and he was very poor. He was a pig herdsman. Interestingly enough, when he became an emperor, by some chance, he became friendly with the chief rabbi of Israel of that time. And so he issued an edict, a law that established the sacrifice to Roman gods everywhere in Roman Empire, and only Jews were exempt from this, which was very important for Jews, of course. And there was some moral in the story saying that we shall respect every person, even if he is very poor, even if his job is something dirty and unpleasant. We never know what will turn out of this person, what he will become in the future. Today, this Diocletian palace does not exist as a separate structure. When you visit Split, you don't go to visit the palace as you do like in Madrid. You come and visit the palace, which is separate structure, separated from the rest of the town. Here, Diocletian Palace became part of the town. So you walk down the streets of Old Split, and here and there you see the pieces of the old walls of Diocletian Palace, some of the towers, some of the columns, some arches, because it was rebuilt so many times, and it's essential part of the town. People of Split used to settle within the walls of the town, including Jews. Especially in this eastern section of the palace, archaeologists found 13 images of menorah carved on the walls of this particular section. And so it seems that when Jews needed to find new home, leaving Salona, they came here and they were able to settle within the walls of Diocletian Palace. Some say that maybe the central room of the eastern part of the palace served as a synagogue. This is the room underneath of the former imperial apartments, and this is the area where some of those carvings of menorah were found. See, archaeologists, such an interesting and intriguing science. You can never say, oh, we found all of it. It's something that keeps going on and on. So our knowledge today may change in the next several years if something new is found here. In any case, based on the archaeological findings and certain documents, we can say that we see the Jewish presence in Split constant from antiquity to Middle Ages. Jews kept living here in this area starting from the 7th century at least. Much of its history, Split was under Venetian rule from the 15th to the late 18th century. And then all of those areas under Venetian rule, they were liked by Jews. They offered Jews relatively good conditions. So in the late 16th century, we see about 300 Jewish families that arrived in Split, running away from Spain and Portugal. So we understand that the Jewish community of Split was formed as Sephardic community. The community was growing, and then in the 16th century, Jews, there was a fire in the Diocletian Palace, and so Jews had to come out of the palace walls. So see, if we look at the map, the modern map of the old Split, see this kind of red, these are the borders of the old palace walls. This light color, this is former Jewish quarter. Part of it was located within the walls of the palace. Part of it was outside of the palace walls. These are entrances to the Jewish quarter, and this lilac one is the synagogue that we're going to visit. When we come to see the Jewish quarter of Split, first we see the street named after Daniel Rodriguez or Rodriga. He was a Spanish Jew living in the second half of the 16th century. When Spanish Jews arrived in Split, they already had a lot of business experience. So they were looking for opportunities to improve the local, the place where they arrived. And so Daniel Rodrigo, he offered a Venetian government an idea to establish a port in Split, which seemed to him very logical since the city was located near the seashore, in order to facilitate the transit of goods to and from Ottoman, Turkey, and India. Venetian government considered his proposal, and yes, he was granted the permission to construct the port at his own expense. So that he did it. He also opened the first bank in Split. And honestly, it's Daniel Rodriguez and this Sephardic Jewish community, those Sephardic Jews that arrived here from Spain and Portugal, that turned Split into active and prosperous port on Adriatic Sea. Lots of historical researchers speak about Split flourishing thanks to the effort of Spanish Jews here. The streets of the Jewish quarter are narrow. It's nice to walk down here because even on a hot sunny day, they stay cool and pleasant. We find this street name is called Żydowski Prolas, meaning Jewish entrance. So it's the entrance into the former Jewish quarter. This is actually a synagogue. It's located in two buildings that are put together, and the back wall of it is part of it's also the wall of Diocletian Palace. So it's kind of built into the wall of the Diocletian Palace. The synagogue of Split, it's a Sephardic synagogue that dates back to the early 16th century, and then it was remodeled in the early 18th century. It's considered to be the second oldest active Sephardic synagogue in the world, the synagogue which is still in use. It's active one. Unfortunately, the synagogue's archives and furniture and lots of religious objects, they were set aflame in 1942 during the Second World War. We'll come to this subject in a couple of minutes. But this gorgeous, for example, marble Torah ark was preserved. The synagogue is tiny, giving us an idea, and the image of Split Jewish community never grew into a large one. We never had large number of Jews here. It was always this small, very traditional community living face-to-face Sephardic community. And these are the photographs of the interior of the synagogue. These are some of the pre-war photographs that still show us those beautiful old Torah scrolls and Torah shells and different ritual objects. Unfortunately, most of it was destroyed over one day during the Second World War. Historically, the Jews of Split were mainly merchants, physicians, and of course tailors. You never have a Jewish community without a big number of tailors. That's essential. Interestingly enough, we'll see it here in Split and also in Dubrovnik. The Jewish physicians are specifically mentioned. Historically, they played a very important role in a town's life. Venetian authorities protected Jews from the Inquisition and also favored them because Venice was interested in the trade with Ottoman Empire, and so Jews served as middlemen between Venice and Ottoman Empire. Also, in the late 16th century, thanks to the efforts of Daniel Rodriguez, Split received a status of Porto Franco, free port. If you remember our conversation about Odessa, or Brody, we discussed the importance of this status, how this status provides the port city with the privileges, how port city may flourish having this status of this free tax-free trading. Split invited Jewish merchants from Ottoman Empire. Those willing to settle here were given lots of privileges, like they did not have to pay a special residence tax, they received personal immunity, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, in the 18th century, the pressure from the Catholic Church increased, and also the economical issues in Venice caused certain new heavy laws that fell on the head of split Jews. New regulations were established. Like Jews had to wear a special yellow hat, and then they had to stay within the borders of Jewish quarter between the midnight and the sunrise. They were not allowed to leave ghetto, the Jewish neighborhood in a certain on Thursday and Friday prior to Easter. They were supposed to close their shops on Christian holidays, and so on and so forth. And together, all these new regulations, the Jews did not like and were not happy with, and the general decadence of Venice in the late 18th century caused many Jewish families to leave. They were not interested in staying here anymore. And we see that shortly after the introduction of these new regulations, there were only 173 Jews left in Split. So the number of Jews decreased. All these regulations were abolished by Napoleon in the early 19th century. That's what Napoleon did in every location that his army entered, except for the Russian Empire. He abolished any discriminative regulations concerning Jews. Post-Napoleonic wars in the 19th century, Split, together with the rest of Croatia, was passed to Austria, and full emancipation was granted to Split Jews together with all Austrian Jews. In late 19th century, we'll come back to Austrian part of the history a little bit later, but we always talk about it where we go to Poland or Western Ukraine. And here is all those territories in the 19th century belonged to Austrian Empire. I already mentioned the fact that those beautiful objects, beautiful religious ritual objects that were preserved in the synagogue were set aflame in 1942. It took place right here. This is People's Square, Piazza Square, in the center of Split. It's here that you find this wonderful historical bookstore called Knjižara, meaning bookstore, Morpurga. It originally belonged to Vid Morpurga, an incredible businessman, a Jewish businessman, and also a publisher and politician, the head of Split Chamber of Commerce, the founder of Dalmatian People's Bank, the one who owned different businesses and also organized this bookstore with the reading room and a publishing house in the city. The one who actively participated in Croatian national movement. It's true for all of Croatia and most of Balkans and most of Central and Eastern Europe, that in the 19th century, Jewish intelligentsia, educated Jews, supported national movements in these areas. So here in Croatia, lots of Jews actively supported national movement, the idea of Croatians to have their own state, to get away from Austrian Empire, supported it emotionally and financially, of course. So it was, in 1940, prior to the occupation, there were 284 Jews in Split. In April 1941, Split was occupied by the Italian troops. And so it was part of this Italian occupation zone of Yugoslavia. Yes, Italians launched anti-Semitic agitation in the city, but they did not persecute Jews at the beginning. Split became home to the hundreds of Jewish refugees from Germany, Poland, Czech, and Austria who would run towards the south, trying to get away, trying to leave Nazi Europe. We think that about 3,000 Jews passed through the city. when the registration was conducted by the Italian authorities in 1941, it showed us that there were about 700 Jewish families in Split, which is a much bigger number than the number of pre-war Jews in the city. In June 1942, it was Saturday, 12th of June 1942, when the group of the fascists broke into the synagogue and the Jewish community building and the bookstore and the print shop of Widmar Purga, beating Jews, destroying the buildings, robbing them, bringing all different precious Torah scrolls and old books and all those ritual objects into this square, or putting all of it into a giant fire and kind of a dancing around it. This particular, see, there's this metal stone here, which has an inscription explaining what had happened here, saying that we will not forget and will never let it happen again. It was put up by the Split municipality in 2018. Italy capitulated in September 1943, and then again, before Germans entered the town, then hundreds of Jews crossed Adriatic in small boats to Italy or to the partisan-held islands. Others joined the partisan forces. Along our series, we'll have a chance to speak about partisan movement on the territory of former Yugoslavia. It's a separate story, and there's a great Jewish story as part of it. The remaining male Jews were made to register within the German authorities, and then in October 1943, they were arrested and sent to the concentration camp near Belgrade, which is modern-day Serbia, and where most of them were murdered. So out of 284 Jews of pre-war Jewish community of Split, about 150 were murdered during the Holocaust. Many those who survived left Split, and today there is very small but still active Jewish community in Split, and you can find their website and visit it and follow the news. If you plan to visit Split and you want to visit the synagogue, please contact the Jewish community to arrange your visit. This is, by the way, the photograph of the old Jewish cemetery in Split. So what we shall remember is that Jewish tradition of Split, it's Sephardic Jewish tradition. It's mainly community of Jews that came here from Spain and Portugal and who helped Split to turn into the prosperous port city 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. From Split, we'll go down south, closer to the border with Montenegro, and we visit Dubrovnik, the most famous city of all Croatia, the city where cruise ship stops, and the city which is visited by millions of tourists every year. The city was built in the 6th century, and originally was much of its history was under Byzantine protection, but then it went under Venetian rule. And starting from the mid-14th century and up to the 19th century, so most of its history, it was independent. It was Dubrovnik aristocratic republic, an independent republic on the shore of Adriatic Sea, constant rival of Venice. The architecture of Dubrovnik was under a heavy influence of Venetian art and Italian art in general, and you walk down the streets of Dubrovnik, you may have a feeling that you are in Italy or even in Venice if you forget about canals with all these arches and beautiful courtyards and former private palaces and these typical Venetian style windows. It's a beautiful town. It's Italian beauty is visible, and that's why I think it's so much beloved by the travelers. It's full of the old palaces and monuments and churches and old and old towers and wells and so on. This is the most famous well decorated with 12 lions located right in the heart of Dubrovnik. If we look at the map of old Dubrovnik, this is the port area, and this number 9 would be the synagogue. So the Jewish quarter was located around here, very close to the port area, close to the most active part of the city. We know that among the first Jews of Dubrovnik that we know, it was Jewish physician that was offered, that was given a job by Dubrovnik government. We know that in the early 15th century, Dubrovnik government officially allowed Jews to settle here. And so there was, from the very beginning, it was an interesting mix. They were Jews from Spain. They were also Jews from South Italy who came to settle in Dubrovnik, first in the suburbs, then in the 16th century within the city walls. In the mid-16th century, a special official Jewish neighborhood was established. Originally, it was very small, 4 homes and 6 warehouses. 40 years later, there were about 50 Jews, some, meaning 50 men, some with their families. Again, it never turned into giant community. Like look at the middle 18th century. There were 11 Jewish homes inside the Jewish quarter and 19 Jewish homes outside of it. Prior to, at the beginning of the 19th century, there were about 227 Jews out of the total of 6,500 people in Dubrovnik. This, what you have on your screen, adds exactly the Jewish street, the heart of the Jewish quarter. Part of it looks like a staircase, just because Dubrovnik is located on the hill. So to walk there, you keep going up and down. Again, it has this sign, Ulica Żydowska. There are several restaurants, couple shops, and the synagogue and the Jewish museum that we can visit. The synagogue of Dubrovnik is believed to be established already in the mid-14th century, but gained its legal status in the early 15th century. Historically, it was located in a different place, but then after the earthquake, it was moved to this present location. So the synagogue is located in this particular building since 1677. In fact, it's the upper floor of, historically, it was the upper floor of the regular house on Jewish Street. So it was not built specifically as a shul. It was the synagogue put inside an existing Jewish home. This is the main hall of the synagogue. It's one house, but what we have behind these windows covered with a fence, there is ladies' gallery, but it's located in a different home. So it's 2 houses together, one with the main part of the synagogue and another one with a ladies' gallery. Here, unlike Split, quite a number of wonderful Jewish artifacts were preserved during the Second World War, and among them, they were Torah scrolls that date back to the first Sephardic migration, first Sephardic Jews coming to Dubrovnik. So the tradition of Dubrovnik Jewish community is also Sephardic tradition. It's mainly Spanish Jews or Jews from South Italy that also had a Spanish origin. So when you come to the synagogue, you can visit the synagogue itself and also come visit the Jewish museum that shows you some of those precious objects that were preserved during the Second World War. For example, those old Torah scrolls and Torah shells and parahets and Torah covers, and so on and so forth. In the 18th century, there were about 200 Jews in Dubrovnik. we see the mention of Jewish activities in the city's archives. We see that there were Jewish schools, they were Jewish teachers. There is a mention of Jewish weddings, of course, organized in town. There was a Jewish bookseller. And we understand the Jews played a very important role in commercial life of Dubrovnik. See, Dubrovnik was very important commercial port on Adriatic Sea, constantly having competition with Venice, competing with Venice over the control of trading routes in the Adriatic Sea. And Jews were among the pioneers in, for example, marine insurance. They also participated in maritime ventures as co-owners of the ships that went as far as Scandinavia and America. Or, for example, they supplied loans for the equipment of such ships. And again, there was this period in the 18th century of the general economical decline of Dubrovnik. And whenever there are economical issues, the restrictions are put on Jews. We saw it in Split. We see it here with this general economic decline of Dubrovnik. The restrictions were imposed on all foreigners, including Jews who out of a sudden were considered foreigners, not taking into consideration that they have been living here for centuries. Certain restrictions were put considering the ability of Jews living outside of the ghetto, outside of the Jewish quarter. The authorities tried to move all the Jews into the ghetto. When we speak about the Jewish history of this region, we pay specific attention to the Jewish physicians. We see it in cities' archives, both in Split and here in Dubrovnik, constant mention of Jewish doctors, of Jewish physicians. We even have this image dating back to the mid-16th century of the Jewish merchant and Jewish doctor. From Dubrovnik, we know some of the names, like, for example, Amadeus Lusitanus, who served as the town's doctor. So Jewish doctors always played a very important role in the society life here in this part of the world. Among other interesting monuments, the monuments of the Jewish interest that you may find in Dubrovnik, you will see the small fountain that historically was located in Jewish quarter. Then it was moved outside of it. Now it's close to this particular pile gate. It's a special Jewish fountain dating back to the 16th century. The thing is that Jews were not allowed to take water from that main beautiful fountain with 12 lions. So that's why Jews had to have their own fountain. In the mid-17th century, we see the Jewish community purchased a plot of land east of the city walls to build a cemetery, and this old Jewish cemetery of Dubrovnik is still visible. We can still visit it. Jews of Dubrovnik, together with Jews of Split, together with Jews of Zagreb, together with all Jews of Croatia, received full emancipation in the late 19th century when the Emperor of Austria, Franz Joseph I, emancipated all Austrian Jews, saying that civil rights and the country's policy is not contingent in the people's religion. And so finally, Jews received full equal rights. Again, whenever we speak of this part of the world, we keep going back over and over again, back to these laws. It was like the emancipation was given in two steps. First, it was this edict, it was the Edict of Tolerance, according to which Jews were permitted to live wherever they choose, to enter the trades and professions that they wanted, to open factories, to own the land if they wanted to work on it. All of it was done under the idea of making Jews productive and useful for the state. And together with those freedoms, Jews also received certain limitations. Like, for instance, the power of rabbinic courts was limited, and now all the matters of the marriage, divorce, burial practices had to be conformed to the state law. Jews had to adopt first and family names from a list of given by the authorities, so the German sound names. So for the Jewish community of those days, there were certain advantages and disadvantages of such emancipation. Still, Jews of Dubrovnik continue, even after this emancipation, they continued rather traditional life, and almost up to the Second World War, we see Jewish families continuing the traditional life where women normally stayed at home, where marriages were arranged by the parents. After the First World War, Dubrovnik became part of that new kingdom of Croatians, Serbs, and Slovenians, something which will become Yugoslavia after the Second World War. And within this new kingdom, Dubrovnik Jews continued their traditional life, their traditional businesses, small community, but the community proud of itself, living life that they knew, that they enjoyed, living on the same place for not just generations, but for centuries. So in 1941, Italian troops took over Dubrovnik. You see it exactly on this photograph, Italian troops marching along the streets of Dubrovnik. You know that Italians did not allow mass deportations of Jews, and then so many, again, Dubrovnik's story is quite similar to the story of Split. We see here lots of refugees, Jewish refugees, especially from other parts of Yugoslavia that was under Croatian control, where the situation was much worse. We're going to speak about it when we visit Zagreb. So the started coming to Dubrovnik looking for a safer place. It was under Italian government that anti-Semitic laws were established, the restriction of movement, the wearing of yellow star, the confiscation of the property, and also the concentration camp on the beautiful island near Dubrovnik was also established. If you look at the, into the travel book, into the traveler advertisements, you will see that Lopud, this island, is being advertised as an absolute paradise in Adriatic Sea, and it's true today. It's incredibly serene, beautiful island with wonderful quiet beaches and historical architecture. But during the Second World War, the concentration camp was located here, and then some Jews who were put into these concentration camps survived because they were taken by the partisans, either to the liberated parts of Yugoslavia or they joined partisan battalions. Those who failed to leave concentration camp were deported to German death camps and perished there after the capitulation of Italy and the German occupation that took place in 1943. And again, we'll speak about the partisan movement, but a little bit later, not today, but when we speak about Serbia, that part of that conversation we'll dedicate to the history of the partisan movement during the Second World War, and especially the Jewish participation. Today in Dubrovnik, there are very few Jews living there. There's no permanent rabbi. The rabbi would come there if needed for the service. Still the synagogue and the museum there can be visited, and there are special Jewish tours, walking tours around the old part of Dubrovnik that will bring you to all those locations and tell you the story of Jewish community of Dubrovnik. And then Zagreb. Today, Zagreb, the capital of Croatia and the home to the most active and the biggest Jewish community in all of the country. This, by the way, is the central square of Zagreb. And historically, it used to be the main market square of Zagreb. We'll come back to it at some point today. And historically, most of these buildings surrounding the square belonged to Jews. The history of Zagreb Jews differs from the one of Split and Dubrovnik. Jews first arrived in Zagreb already in the 13th century from different locations, from France, from Malta, from Albania. But in 16th century, they were expelled from Zagreb. The local government thought that they sympathized Turks. And so they resettled in Zagreb only in the middle of the 18th century. So Jewish community of Zagreb is much younger than those of Split and Dubrovnik. And this time, in the middle of the 18th century, it was mainly Ashkenazi Jews from Hungary. So the tradition of Zagreb Jewish community is opposite to the tradition of Split and Dubrovnik because it's Ashkenazi Jewish tradition and it's a much younger community. By the mid of the 19th century, there were about 50 families in Zagreb, 50 Jewish families in Zagreb. Together with the rest of Croatia, Zagreb became part of Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and together with the rest of the Austrian Jews in Zagreb got emancipated in the late 19th century. In the 19th century, there was a proper Jewish community with a rabbi, with a cemetery. Successful. It was successful and visible Jewish community that enjoyed the emancipation and took advantage of it. If we look at the tourist map of Zagreb, we will see that it's divided into two sections. Where you see this red route, it's upper town with this famous cathedral, and where you see this blue line, it's lower town, famous for its cafes and restaurants and historical streets and boulevards. We will come to the place where these two areas of the town come together. We need this particular square. That's where the main Zagreb synagogue was located. Unlike Split and Dubrovnik, here I can't say is located because this very synagogue was destroyed during the Second World War. It was mid-19th century that the Jewish community grew to like 700 members, meaning 700 men who paid taxes and who would pay the community fee. And so they purchased a piece of land in the heart of Zagreb and built the synagogue. The synagogue was built in 1867. When you look at the design of it, you will see the similarity to this very picture on the right, which is a synagogue in Vienna on Leopoldstrasse. See that Leopoldstrasse synagogue in Vienna became a model to a lot of modernized synagogue around Europe. We see them everywhere in Russian Empire, in Ukraine, in Poland, even in Siberia. And here as well, you can see that the design is very similar, meaning that the Jewish community of Zagreb by that time considered itself to be modernized community. To be the community of Maskilim, of the Jewish Enlightenment. According to the laws of Austrian Empire, the synagogue did not have entrance from the street. It had to be entered from the sides. That was the law, not to make synagogue part of the city life, not to make it too much of a city object. Today, there is empty spot. There's parking lot here. because the synagogue was destroyed in 1941, and nothing was built on this spot since then. This is the model of a synagogue, and here is the pre-war photograph of the interior. See this large hall with the open-air gallery for ladies, all those features of modernized synagogue of the late 19th century. By the 1900s, the Jewish population of all Croatia increased up to 20,000 people, majority of them concentrating in Zagreb. This is the general view of the street in Zagreb with the synagogue on it. I promised you to come back to this square, former main market square of Zagreb. And if you ever come here with a private tour guide, you will be able to come to the square, and your guide, if he or she will do, if he or she does Jewish tours, will be able to tell you the story of each particular, building. We could have had a tour just around the square and speak about Jewish families that used to own nearly every building facing this very square, including, for example, this wonderful private mansion that historically belonged to Edmund Kolmar, a banker, and also a founder of and the sponsor of the Institute for the Blind and Deaf. He was famous for his incredible charitable work. He received a special medal and special title from the Austrian emperor for his incredible deeds. When the story came to the Second World War, it was Kalmar family that received a special protection from nationalist Croatian Ustasha government. They were among selected Jews that were given legal protection, considering their importance, so that they could, in the future, they could mix with Croatians and make Croatians genetically better. See, after the First World War, this kingdom of Yugoslavia was formed. It united very different territories: Slovenia, Croatia, that what was then Dalmatia. See, it was separate parts, so split, and Dubrovnik were kind of a separate part. Now they belong to Croatia. Bosnia and Herzegovina, so something which was called Vojvodina, now it's part of Serbia, northern and southern Serbia, Montenegro. These very different territories were united together, and Jewish life was flourishing in that interwar period. Zagreb had this headquarters of the Zionist Federation. There was, of course, Maccabi Sports Club, choir, a special women's and youth organizations, the Union of Jewish Employees. There was a special Jewish newspaper, the leading Jewish newspaper in Yugoslavia was published here in Zagreb. Jews became thanks to the general emancipation and the positive economical situation, Jews became very active in different new businesses. Like they were pioneers in export businesses and also local industries. Jews served as Croatia's first librarian was Jewish man Leopold Hartmann. He organized public libraries. He came out with this idea of lending books to people so they could read. He also established a giant printing house. The chairman of the Jewish community was among the founders of forensic medicine in Croatia, and so on and so forth. So Jews, being minority in this giant kingdom of Yugoslavia, were very well visible, and many were very successful, both Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews. On 6th of April, 1941, Belgrade was bombed, heavily bombed, and 11 days later, Yugoslav army capitulated. Now the territory of Yugoslavia was divided among different countries. For example, Serbia was occupied by Germany. Part of it was occupied by Hungary up here in the north. Most of the coastal line, modern-day Croatia and Montenegro, was occupied by Italy, including Split and Dubrovnik. And in central Croatia, became an independent state, but the German ally under the rule of so-called Ustaše government, Ustasha nationalist government. Remember that we mentioned the fact that starting from the mid-19th century, Jews actively supported national movement in Croatia. They sympathized the idea of Croatians to have their own state. It didn't help. Taking control over the territory, this Ustasha government had an idea of having pure Croatian state, so to get rid of Serbs, Jews, and Roma people. What you have here on the right, this is the message calling on Jews and Serbs to surrender their weapons at the risk of being condemned. By 1941, there were about 12,000 Jews in Croatia. We know that during that period of time, from 1941 to 45, and when Croatia was under Ustasha, a nationalist government, approximately 30,000 Jews, between 25 to 30,000 Roma, and over 350,000 Serbs were murdered. As soon as they came to power, Ustasha immediately embarked on a campaign to purge Croatia out of foreign elements, to clean Croatia out of anybody but Croatians. It concerned, as I mentioned, Jews, Roma, and Serbs. They established concentration camps on the territory of Croatia. Many Jews were murdered in those concentration camps right on arrival. Others were deported to Germany, were deported to Auschwitz. There is a book that you can find on Amazon. It's called The Holocaust in Croatia. It's relatively new. Generally speaking, the subject of Holocaust in Croatia is still very sensitive. And Croatia is not unique in this way. We see the sensitivity, not willing to speak much about it, willing to speak about deportations to Auschwitz, but not willing to speak about the murder that took place right there on the spot. We see it not only in Croatia, but in many other countries that were ruled by the nationalist government during the Second World War. So when we visit Zagreb, we, for example, find this particular monument, which is relatively new. It's built out of suitcases, and it marks the place from where Jews were deported to Auschwitz. So it does not speak about Jews who were murdered in concentration camps on the territory of Croatia, but about the deportation. This is the monument located in the Jewish cemetery with the inscription. There's the figure of Moses with 10 commandments, and there's an inscription in Hebrew and Serbo-Croatian that this monument is built to commemorate Jewish fighters fallen in the struggle for the liberation of Yugoslavia and to Jewish victims of fascism. Looking at this inscription, we understand how difficult this subject is, how hard it is to speak about it, and to put the story together and face it. If we visit Zagreb today, we find a live and active Jewish community. We find, in fact, 3 different Jewish communities. We have this Beit Israel community with its own rabbi and school and kindergarten and all different activities. We find another Jewish community of Zagreb with its, or it's considered to be that very historical congregation, that very historical community with lots of different activities, rabbi with the gorgeous synagogue, small but traditional, with this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Aron HaKodesh. Look at those wood carving with pomegranates, wonderful decorations. And the museum dedicated to the Jewish history in all of Croatia. And there's also a small but active Chabad community in Zagreb. So whenever you are in Zagreb, you're welcome to contact these communities. Chabad can provide you, by the way, with the kosher food. There is no kosher cafe or restaurant, but there is kosher delivery. The Jewish community can also give you the list of food products that are considered kosher in and available in the stores of Croatia, stores in Zagreb or other parts of Croatia. Usually we finish our conversation with food. Aside of the meat dishes and fish that you find, fish especially you find on the seashore, like sea bass and dorado and so on, and you find wonderful meat dishes, a lot of lamb, but also Croatian cuisine is full of vegetables, and some of the traditional Jewish Balkan dishes would be vegetable dishes, like for instance, steamed or baked cauliflower, or something called guveç. It's the vegetable stew. Among the vegetables that are beloved here and so popular in Croatia, that would be bell peppers and zucchini and tomatoes. So nobody will leave, will stay hungry in Croatia. It's warm, it's interesting, it's welcoming, and it's tasty country that I would encourage you to visit and learn more about the Jewish history and culture of this region. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and I'm here to answer your questions.
Evgenia, thank you so much. I'm going to jump directly into questions so that we manage as many as possible, and I'm going to go by order of city that you introduced. So some questions about Split, then Dubrovnik, and we'll get to Zagreb at the end. So there was a question about Split. If in the 1st and 2nd century were Jews citizens of the Roman Empire, or did they arrive in there as slaves?
No, they were citizens. They arrived as the citizens of Roman Empire. We see it everywhere. Any area of Europe or Asia that was controlled by Roman Empire, we immediately see their Jewish presence. We speak about it when we go to, let's say, Bukhara, when we go to Crimea, with any other area, wherever, when we go to Romania, if there were Roman troops there, they were Jews as well.
You mentioned the synagogue in Split is active. Who's the community there that is maintaining the synagogue?
There is still a small Jewish community, the descendants of those historical Sephardic Jews living in Split. So there is the official website of the Split Jewish community. And if you visit Split, I definitely recommend you to contact the community in advance so you can arrange the visit to the synagogue.
Perfect, thanks. And as all of you know, you'll get those links in the follow-up email. Another question was about, there was a moment where you mentioned that Jews could loan money but not engage in commerce. Can you say a word about the difference between those two things, or was it just period of times where they could and couldn't
Thank you for your question. Yes, it was about time. It's this period of time in the 18th century with the general economical troubles, plus the pressure from the Catholic Church, it would be true for both Split and Dubrovnik, that out of a sudden, the life that Jews have enjoyed for a long period of time changed. And out of a sudden, Jews basically woke up to see that the new restrictions were put on them, that the local authorities wanted to solve their own problems, trying to limit Jewish activities, thinking that maybe then others could occupy those places, that maybe they can change something. It was a matter of time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a question about, was it a quarter or was it a ghetto? And it seems that also that changed with time, being a quarter and something very open, or being a ghetto under restricting rules.
Most of its history, both in Split and Dubrovnik, Jews were able to settle both within the Jewish quarter and outside of it, except for the period of time when out of a sudden the government want them to brought into this quarter and gonna log them in there.
Another question was about the Sephardic Jews in Split and Dubrovnik. Did they speak Ladino? Is there a Judeo local language?
They historically, yes, they historically they spoke Ladino. They do not, I mean, it's not a spoken language for them anymore, because they now, as Croatians, they speak Croatian. With languages, it was very interesting because these territories changed hands so many times. So you say Jews of, for example, Dubrovnik, at a certain period of time, they spoke Italian because Italian was the main spoken language. Then it changed into German and Austrian because in Austrian Empire, everybody was forced to learn German language. It was the main language of the empire. Then now, because it's Croatia, now they speak Croatian.
Okay, I'm saying thank you and running to the next question so that I'm using most of the time. There was, when you were talking about Dubrovnik and the concentration camp, you mentioned for a moment something about Jews that were able to leave or move away from the concentration camp. And you mentioned the partisan movement, which is something I don't think we've ever heard about, anyone leaving a concentration camp. So can you say a few words about that?
It. I promise you will hear it from me. They were, were they able to leave the camp? It was this short period after Italy capitulated, but German troops hadn't entered yet. So in that short period of time, Jews were able to join partisan squads, and also they were Jewish partisans who would bring Jews into the other safer areas. Those who did not join, then they were murdered. Now, the story of Jewish partisans, we will discuss it because it's really interesting. There is a lot to speak about. We will do it as part of our Serbian conversation.
Okay. One last question about Zagreb. You mentioned the two communities and they're both Orthodox. Are there other types of religious or non-observant communities in Zagreb today, or?
There's Chabad. There is a main Jewish community, which is Orthodox. There is Beit Israel, which is slightly different. There is no such thing as like a reform, conservative. It's tiny number. It's tiny number of Jews, and so they're very small. Different. It's too small to have too many different communities, to have too many variants of Judaism. Basically, most of Zagreb Jews are highly assimilated Jews. There's a high rate of intermarriage. So these communities, they work with Jews to preserve the tradition, to keep at least the children within the community and have them celebrate holidays. Remember that Croatia was part of communist Yugoslavia, and communist era kind of threw people away from religion very much, and much of the religion tradition was lost in that period. So now the main goal of the community is to, keep people closer to the community life, to help them preserve at least some traditions.
Okay. Thank you very, very, very much. I think it's also fascinating to hear a story of a country through specific cities, which makes sense with a country that shifted so many hands. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you enjoyed this, we're gonna have the continuation of the series in the next following month. You can check it out on the registration list. You'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow, which will include the recording of this program and a lot of reading materials, and again, the link to register for the next programs. Thank you for being here with us, and have a good evening, good day, wherever you are. Toda rabba. Thank you, Evgenia.
Bye.